Welcome, my name's Jenny Close. In this presentation, I'll discuss, in a nutshell, what Pope Francis is saying about the nature and purpose of synodality. I'm speaking to you from the Catholic Archdiocese of Brisbane, the land of the Yagara and Turrbal people, and from the Catholic parish of St Therese and St Anthony in Brisbane, with the support of the Grail in Australia. The notion of synodality underpins the vision that Pope Francis has for the Church. The theme of the current Synod of Bishops is For a Synodal Church, Communion, Participation, Mission, but it's commonly known as the Synod on Synodality. The Synod had a long preparation period in which all the churches around the world were asked to give input. The first assembly of the bishops was in October last year. But I'm not going to be talking about the Synod per se, but just the notion of synodality and exploring what that means. First of all, where does the notion come from? Well, the theology of Vatican II was shaped by this notion. So in the West, the idea of a synodal church was revived during the watershed moment in the 1960s. That wave of renewal was shepherded first by Pope John XXIII and then by Pope Paul VI. I have strong memories of those heady and exciting days after the Council when new ideas abounded and church folk were not afraid to be innovative. Ah, for the good old days. Well, I don't really believe in the mythical good old days. In reality, there were many obstacles and stumbling blocks. The practice of synodality was actually a revival in the West of an idea that was understood in the churches of the East from ancient times. An American cardinal recently wrote about the dual origins of our contemporary understanding of synodality. He wrote that Pope Francis has insisted that for the Church to be true to itself, we must act in a more synodal way. This is in keeping with the vision of the renewal promoted in the teachings of the Second Vatican Council, which stressed the common dignity and mission of all the baptized for understanding the mystery and mission of the Church. He also pointed to the East and to the writings of John Chrysostom, who observed that church is the name for walking together, synodia. You can see St John Chrysostom depicted in the mosaic here. He lived in the late 4th century, which was just decades after the Nicene Creed was formulated. St John served as the Archbishop of Constantinople, which was at the heart of the Eastern Church. In preparation for the Synod on Synodality, there was a series of conferences that explored this Eastern connection. The book pictured on the left, Listening to the East, Synodality in Eastern and Oriental Orthodox Church Traditions, was published in 2023, and it contains some of the papers given at the conferences. The conferences were inspired by this passage in Evangelii Gaudium. In the dialogue with our Orthodox brothers and sisters, we Catholics have the opportunity to learn more about the meaning of episcopal collegiality and their experience of synodality. The term episcopal collegiality simply indicates a fraternal and collaborative style of working relationship among the bishops. Here are a few examples of the topics discussed at the conference. A number of the papers were about the theology of synodality. The first one is an example and was written by a Serbian Orthodox bishop who works in America. There were also quite a few papers focusing on women, some even written by women, thank goodness. And there were various other topics, including a few on youth. So you can see from this small collection of chapters that the conference was a mixture of theoretical and practical, and that the presenters were a mixed lot as well. Getting back to the connection with Vatican II, the Synod of Bishops was established by Pope Paul VI in 1965 in response to the work of the Council. You can see here in the photograph a representative selection of bishops from around the world gathering with the Pope. Synod is derived from two Greek words, and it means coming together or walking together. The purpose of a synod is for the bishops to interact with each other in order to share information and experiences and to find pastoral solutions which have a universal validity and application. So the bishops from Australia, for instance, will learn about the issues arising for the people of God in parts of Africa, South America, or wherever. So it's an opportunity for the bishops to broaden their perspective, and also creates challenges since it must become obvious that one size does not fit all. So formulating universal solutions becomes a Herculean task. In his 2018 document, Apostolic Constitution on the Synod of Bishops, Pope Francis emphasised the notion of collegiality, meaning that the Pope governs the Church in collaboration with the bishops of the local churches, respecting their proper autonomy. And he went on to say that the Synod of Bishops must increasingly become a privileged instrument for listening to the people of God. So an important role for the bishops was to provide a listening ear in their churches in order to bring the voices of the people of God into this central gathering of the Synod of Bishops. The synodal process is a combination of top-down and bottom-up, because the issues that the bishops take to the synod and make decisions about originate from the voices of the people of God. So top-down from the bishops, but bottom-up from the people of God. A balance between the two is the ideal, but from experience we know that the process of consultation is often weighted in favour of top-down. However, if you're like me, you live in hope of better things to come. The point of listening to the people of God is to hear the sense of the faith from the faithful. You will hear these two Latin terms bandied about with regard to synodality: sensus fidei, or sense of the faith, and sensus fidelium, or the sense of the faithful. Those terms just mean the understanding among all the baptized of their faith and their relationship with God in the context of everyday life. So again, the role of the bishops is to hear what the people of God have to say and relay that back to the synod. In the papacy of Francis, there have been 4 major synods: on the family in 2014, on young people in 2018, on the Pan-Amazon region in 2019, and now this one on synodality, the first phase of which began in 2021, and the first assembly of the bishops was in October in 2023. Last year this book was published, Walking Together, The Way of Synodality by Pope Francis. Now he didn't sit down and write something new. Rather, this is a compilation of addresses and letters and other documents that Francis wrote over many years concerning the notion of synodality. For example, this address on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the institution of the Synod of Bishops in 2015. Synodality, as a constitutive element of the Church, offers us the most appropriate interpretive framework for understanding the hierarchical ministry itself. If we understand, as St. John Chrysostom says, that Church and Synod are synonymous, inasmuch as the Church is nothing other than the journeying together of God's flock along the paths of history towards the encounter with Christ the Lord, then we understand too that within the Church no one can be raised up higher than others. On the contrary, in the Church it is necessary that each person lower himself or herself so as to serve our brothers and sisters along the way. This is still hierarchical, of course, but nonetheless underpinned by the model of servant leadership. But of course, easier said than done. And again you have this top-down, bottom-up approach. This is one of the other chapters. At the opening of the current Synod process in 2021, Francis identifies 3 risks to the Synod. Firstly, formalism, that the Synod might turn out to be just a show pony, all style and little substance, making the right noises but not achieving much. Secondly, intellectualism, that it might be too airy-fairy and esoteric rather than focusing on grounded realities. And thirdly, that the members of the Synod aren't brave enough to look for creative solutions. Many of you will know Father Ormond Rush. He serves as a priest theologian in the Brisbane Archdiocese. Orm is an international expert on the reception of Vatican II. He was a periti, or theological expert, at the Australian Plenary Council, and he's been appointed for a similar role at the current Synod on Synodality. The Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference published an informative video of Orm discussing the notion of synodality. I've used a snippet of it here, and I put the link to the video in the notes below. It's worth watching, so I recommend that you check it out. Here's the introduction.
So synodality is Vatican II in a nutshell. Pope Francis hasn't created something new. He's drawn from the Eastern churches this notion of a synodal church. But as one bishop responded in here when Pope Francis started emphasising this, he said, from now on, when a synod meets, it's not just some of the bishops some of the time, meeting every few years together. It's not some of the bishops some of the time, it's all of the church all of the time. Now, that captures many elements in the Second Vatican Council.
Here Orm is reiterating that synodality is not an original idea from Francis, but it comes from the Eastern churches. And this is an important point, that synodality is not some of the bishops some of the time, it's all of the church all of the time. Orm lists 4 significant points about the nature of synodality. The first point relates to the role of the Holy Spirit. The church must be Christ-centred and Spirit-led. And he refers to the advice given by Francis to the bishops from the Book of Revelations, listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. So this listening is not just an intellectual technique, it's a faith-filled process. Orm's second point about synodality relates to the role of the local churches. Referring to Vatican II, he reminds us of the rediscovery of the importance of the local church and local bishops that happened at that time. And he identifies a core idea about synodality, the value of listening to the experience of local churches. Here is an example of the local church gathered in Brisbane. I took this photograph in St Stephen's Cathedral at the rite of election last year. The third point is about participation, and if you know anything about the theology of Vatican II, you will recognise this as a key concept. There was an emphasis on the importance of all the baptised, who were called to participate fully, in other words, to be agents in the mission of the Church. This has implications for lay people especially. It means that they are not merely onlookers or followers while the clergy do all the work. Rather, they are called to be actively engaged directly in the mission of the Church, so that wherever a baptised Christian is, that's where the Church is at work in the world. The fourth and last point that Orm makes about synodality is about dialogue. The synodal process is not a megaphone approach, meaning that it's not a one-way diatribe from Rome or the bishops. It's not about collecting data or opinion polls, and it's not majority rules. Orm quotes German Cardinal Walter Kasper, who said that truth is discovered in dialogue, and dialogue requires attentive and respectful listening. But here is the difficult part. It requires listening even to those we don't agree with. Ultimately, this listening means being open to the murmurings of the Holy Spirit through the people of God. So again, this is a faith-filled listening. The dialogue starts in the local parishes, and from there the thoughts are distilled at a diocesan level, a state level, a nationwide level, and internationally. As Orm says, synthesis, synthesis, synthesis. And that's the process of discernment. Orm also recognises that in the stream of life new questions arise, and often the lay people of the Church rather than the clergy are more alert to those questions and more able to find answers for them. Let me repeat Cardinal Kasper's idea, which underpins the synodal process. truth is discovered in dialogue, and that dialogue is with the people of God. So Orm's video is highly recommended. Please check it out when you get a chance. A few days ago, there was a Zoom seminar organised by the Australian Catholic Coalition for Church Reform and Garrett Publishing. It was called Synod on Synodality, Evolving Catholicism and the Synod. I found the description of the Zoom session quite evocative. Catholicism is experiencing a change of era like no other. A revitalised narrative is needed to offer a fresh vision to the faithful still in the pews and rekindle what embers remain among those no longer engaged. For me, the Christian narrative, derived primarily from the scriptures and tradition, is mostly life-giving. But for some it's a stale, worn-out and possibly even oppressive thing. For others, especially many of the young people that I've taught over the years at Australian Catholic University, the narrative is almost completely unknown or misunderstood. So I wonder what a revitalised narrative might look like. One thing's for certain, it can only come from the people of God, inspired by the Holy Spirit. But thankfully, there are many of us working on it. Thanks for listening.